Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 333, Why We Resist Reality, the Fear of Accepting What Is. Well, welcome back to our summer review series, and this month we've been focusing on what it means to build a healthier relationship with yourself. Now, we've already explored self-trust, self-respect, and the importance of caring for yourself rather than continually putting yourself last. I think each of these topics points to a simple but very powerful truth, and that is the relationship you have with yourself influences every other part of your life. Today, we're going to look at another piece of that relationship. I think one that often operates very quietly in the background, but has a tremendous impact on our well-being, I think our decisions, and our ability to move forward. Now, many of us find ourselves, I think, stuck in very familiar patterns, like trying harder, waiting longer, hoping for different outcomes, or maybe carrying burdens that leave us feeling drained. I think often these patterns developed for very good reasons, like we talk about, because they helped you cope, survive, and maybe make sense of difficult experiences. But here's the thing. What happens when the very things that once protected us begin keeping us stuck? And that's what we're going to explore today, because we're going to continue our summer review journey and take a closer look at one of the biggest obstacles to healing, growth, and peace, I think. So we know that self-trust requires reality. We know that self-respect requires reality. And we know self-care requires reality. They're all boundary issues. Because if I'm constantly arguing with reality, I can't have a healthy relationship with myself. Because I'm asking myself to live in some sort of fantasy. So why do we do this? It doesn't make any logical sense. It sounds crazy to you when I say it out loud, right? Well, there are very good reasons. So many of us learned early on that reality just didn't feel safe. And what I mean by that is maybe every day, or even worse, when you least expected it, meaning when things have been calm or good for a while, something bad or unhealthy is there around you. And you were little and therefore you couldn't do much about it. What do I mean by reality? Well, reality meant, perhaps, mom wasn't coming, dad wasn't changing, your sister would create chaos again, your needs weren't going to be met, the relationship wasn't healthy, the person couldn't love you the way you needed, or maybe you never knew when you were going to be yelled at, ridiculed, or ignored. So you learn to cope, not because you were weak, because you were trying to survive. So let's talk about some of the ways you may have coped and where any one of us can learn to resist reality. You know, many of us don't resist reality because we're stubborn or naive. We resist reality because at some point, reality felt very painful, maybe overwhelming, probably really unsafe. Even emotionally unsafe. So we developed ways to either soften it, maybe delay it, or avoid it altogether. And the problem is that what helps us survive in one season of our life and make sense can really keep us stuck in another. So let's look at some of the ways this shows up. Well, here's one a lot of you can probably relate to, and we hit this, I think last year we talked about it, where we focus on potential instead of patterns. Potential, let's face it, is very comforting, right? Because potential allows us to believe that things could get better, that the relationship could improve, that the person could change, that our needs might finally matter. Here's the thing. The problem is that healthy decisions are made based on patterns and reality, not potential. Because patterns tell us what is actually happening. Potential tells us what we wish would happen. So when we focus on that potential, and here's how it ties back into coping, we postpone grief. Versus when we look at patterns, we begin dealing with the reality. And that is a process of metabolizing it. Another thing we can do is we explain and rationalize behavior instead of accepting behavior. We say, oh, my spouse is just acting like that because their boss is a jerk or their job's very stressful. Instead of looking at partner saying, I think they have a hard time with emotional maturity. So many very caring, loving people such as yourself are probably really good at understanding others. You can see their wounds, you can see their stress, their fears, their history, and that understanding someone, of course, is very valuable. But sometimes we use that understanding as a way to make excuses for them and as a way to rescue them, but also, most importantly, as a way to avoid acceptance. Because we become so focused on why someone behaves a certain way that we stop paying attention to the impact of their behavior, especially the impact on us. And understanding does not change reality. And here's the kicker. A person's reasons don't erase the consequences. Now, sometimes acceptance sounds like, I understand why they do this, and I also accept that this is who they are right now, and they may or may not ever change. The other way we can do this, which is rather insidious and invisible, is we can wait. We wait instead of deciding. Waiting can feel so much safer than deciding, because guess what? If we don't decide, we don't have to face loss. We don't have to risk making a mistake. We don't have to close the door. So we hang in there. We wait. We wait for clarity. We wait for certainty. And of course, we wait for someone else to change. We keep waiting for the perfect time, maybe for more information. And sometimes these things are good. It's good to wait. But sometimes waiting is simply delayed decision making. And while we're waiting, life is still moving forward. And we can lose a lot of time, energy, and years. So we hope instead of grieving. Now, hope is beautiful, but sometimes hope becomes a way of avoiding heartbreak as well. Because as long as we keep hoping, we don't have to face what we've lost. We don't have to acknowledge what isn't happening. And we don't have to let go of the future we imagined. And that's what keeps people hanging on. And so many people stay stuck, not because they have too little hope, but because they haven't allowed themselves to grieve. And grief is what helps us release what isn't. And without grief, we stay emotionally attached to possibilities that unfortunately may never become reality. Another thing we do is we fix instead of surrender to what is. So for many people, fixing creates this sense of control. Like if we work harder, maybe if we explain better, we sacrifice more, we help more, maybe we can change the outcome. Maybe we can save the relationship. Maybe we can make, quote unquote, someone understand. Maybe we can finally earn what we've been seeking. But some situations just can't be fixed. What we have to accept is some people don't want what we want. Some problems belong to someone else, so we can't fix them. And so surrender isn't weakness at all. It's recognizing the limits of your control. Another thing we can do, either instead of or alongside these other fun things that I've been mentioning, is we stay busy instead of feeling. Because busyness is one of the most socially accepted forms of avoidance. And when we're busy, we don't have to deal with disappointment or maybe our loneliness, our fear, or our grief, because we stay productive and distracted and occupied. But emotions don't disappear just because we avoid them. They wait. And they often emerge later through some kind of anxiety or resentment, exhaustion, or for some of you, emotional numbness. And so we're afraid to give in, give up, surrender. And so we keep trying instead of letting go. And especially in my country, boy, persistence is often celebrated. And yes, sometimes it should be, but there are moments when continuing to try isn't strength, it's fear. It's fear of acceptance. It's fear of that grief we've been talking about. And for a lot of you, it's just the fear of what comes next. Because if you struggle with control issues, it's going to be really hard for you to let go and just let things happen. But letting go isn't giving up on yourself. I want you to know that. It's giving up that fight against reality. That's very different. Letting go is just acknowledging that not everything is yours to carry, to fix, save, or change. And sometimes that acknowledgement just becomes the beginning of freedom. So the truth is that most of these strategies were developed for very good reasons. They protected us. They helped us cope as kids, because what else were we going to do? They helped us maybe survive very painful experiences. But survival is not thriving, and survival strategies aren't always healing strategies. In fact, most of them are not. And at some point, growth requires something different from us. It requires seeing reality clearly. It requires feeling what we actually feel. It's going to require grieving what we've lost, grieving what we thought was or what was going to be, and really trusting ourselves just enough to move forward from what is, not what we wish were true instead. And that's where acceptance begins, and often that's where healing begins too. So here's the thing, here's the hidden fear, and I think this is like the heart of what we're really talking about, is that many people think they fear reality, but they don't. They really, really fear what reality requires, what it's going to mean. Because it's often going to mean grief. It's going to mean sitting with disappointment, with sadness. It's going to mean change. For some of you, big life upheavals. It's going to mean boundaries. It's going to mean loss and letting go. And that often can be what we're actually avoiding. And sometimes we're not resisting reality because we don't see it. Deep down, we know we're resisting reality because we do see it. And some part of us knows what accepting it would require. But a healthy relationship, you know, with yourself means seeing clearly as you can, beginning to tell yourself the truth, beginning to honor your feelings, allowing the grief to show up. If you're in a space where you're safe enough and you have a couple safe people around you to help you walk through that. And it means accepting reality even when you don't like it. Because acceptance is not approval. And it's not about liking it, and it's not about giving up. It is simply, this is what is true, so now what do I need to do? When we struggle to accept reality, I think our need for control often takes over. And these are those old survival skills we just talked about. So we analyze, we explain, we fix, we convince, we wait, we hope, we rescue, we overfunction, and we keep trying long after that reality has given us such important information. And a lot of times people around us can see that information before we're ready to see it. And we don't want to hear them, do we? But the opposite of accepting reality, I don't think is necessarily denial. A lot of times it looks like control. we just keep trying to influence things because accepting reality would require us to grieve what we can't change, and that feels way too vulnerable. And if you have any emotional trauma in your past and or your present, you might not feel strong enough or safe enough to do that work yet. But the reality is once we start embracing this concept of maybe thinking about considering looking at reality, everything will start to change. Will it be hard? Yes. Will it be a back and forth, 2 forward, 3 back process for a while? Yes. But as you really work on trying to embrace reality, you're also going to feel a lot more grounded and in touch with yourself and your own truth. And you're going to feel like you can trust yourself more. So today we continued our summer review series by exploring, I think, another important aspect of having a healthy relationship with yourself, and that is making friends with reality. Many of us spend a great deal of energy trying to make things work, hold things together, or find ways to create different outcomes in our lives. And those efforts often come from very good intentions, but they can also leave us feeling exhausted, frustrated, and stuck. So we looked at some common patterns that really keep us spinning our wheels and why and how we don't like to face reality and surrender to what is and feel what we feel. And to deal with what that reality means. It's a process, it's a journey, and we need help doing it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Not a fun topic, but an important one. I hope it helped. And wherever you are on this journey of coming to acceptance, really be proud of yourself. Can you imagine how different the world would be if more of us worked on this? All right, so if you found this helpful, pass it along to someone else. Make sure you check the show notes. I keep the links in there and add the new stuff to courses and programs and everything going on. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.